By the early 1980s, the video game industry was sinking. The market was oversaturated with many different consoles and games, most of which were of extremely poor quality. Video game consoles were seen as obsolete to the new hotness personal computers. The golden era of arcade machines was over, and so was the confidence that the public had in the video game industry. Companies were going bankrupt. The peak was in 1983 when the North American and Japanese video game industries started facing colossal losses, a mortifying drop of 97% in revenue in only 2 years. It got to a point where retail brands didn't even want to allow video game products to be sold within their stores. By all accounts, it was over. But then, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES for short, was released to the Western market to explosive success. With extremely rigid quality control of both console and software, it is said that the NES was the biggest contributor for ending the video game crash of 1983. From that point forward, Nintendo became a household name and a titan of the video game industry. But a lesser known part of it is that Nintendo had a turbulent past before breaking into the video game industry. In fact, to this day, Nintendo hasn't even dealt in video games for most of its history. What started as a small playing card manufacturer in 19th century Japan would engage in all sorts of wild and unexpected business ventures. Cab services, instant rice, love hotels, and even clients in the Yakuza. And how did one of the world's most influential gaming companies navigate all these twisted roads to arrive where it is today? To learn that answer, you must go back to the beginning, centuries ago. In the 16th century, Portuguese traders brought Western-style playing cards to Japan. These playing cards became very popular, were even manufactured within the country. But in 1633, the Japanese government decided to close off their borders to the West and ban any form of Western items, and even gambling. But as gambling and drinking remained popular during the era, companies simply changed the look and design of these cards in order to evade the law. And the ever-changing designs eventually led to the creation of the Hanafuda playing cards. Eventually in the 1880s, the Japanese government would finally lift the ban on playing cards, just in time to make Hanafuda an attractive enterprise for a certain man, Fusajiro Yamauchi. Fusajiro founded his very own company in the heart of Kyoto under the name that roughly translated to "Leave Luck to Heaven." In September 23, 1889, Nintendo Koppai was officially opened for business as a manufacturer of Hanafuda cards, and success was explosive. Nintendo soon expanded from Kyoto to Osaka, and in a few years was striking deals with cigarette shops and casinos to distribute Hanafuda all over Japan. But perhaps most important of all, Fusajiro's Hanafuda cards even became popular with the Yakuza. Illegal gambling with cards had never really died down in Japan even during Prohibition, but the newly legal product led to a boom in the revenue of Yakuza-owned casinos and parlors. And it was the Yakuza who popularized the version of the Hanafuda game perfect for gambling, alongside the tradition of opening a fresh deck with every game. Fusajiro made quality product, but having powerful buyers enabled Nintendo's first leap into successful business. The prosperous playing card business of Nintendo lasted well after Fusajiro retired in 1929, and for the entire duration of his son, Sekiryo Yamauchi's time as the company president. But the biggest changes would soon come. Following a stroke in 1948, Sekiryo retired the following year, and then, in 1949, he offered the company to his 21-year-old son, Hiroshi Yamauchi. While the first two presidents of Nintendo chose to run the business without rocking the boat, Hiroshi Yamauchi chose to run Nintendo as an entirely different breed of businessman. Hiroshi established the condition that he would be the only family member working at Nintendo before he accepted the position from his grandfather, and once he was in charge, he immediately fired all of the managers that Sekiryo appointed during his time as president. It is said that Hiroshi was ambitious and foul-tempered, and ran Nintendo in a notoriously imperialistic style that led to a number of employees going on strike, with Hiroshi firing them almost immediately after the fact. Hiroshi was the target of early resentment from his longer-term employees due to his actions and his young age, as in Japan it is customary to defer and respect your elders and those that have been working at a company for a longer period of time. Hiroshi's violent break of tradition would earn him a lot of bitterness from his employees in the years to come, and no small amount of foiled plans. Over the next few years, Hiroshi would push the company forward with everything he had, consolidating all of Nintendo's manufacturing plants in order to speed up the production process and opening an entirely new headquarters in Kyoto. In 1951, Hiroshi changed the name of the company. It became known as Nintendo Karuta, or the Nintendo Playing Card Company. Soon Hiroshi had Nintendo break ground as the very first company in Japan to produce plastic playing cards, and in a few years under his direction, Nintendo would sign a massive licensing deal with the juggernaut of the Western entertainment industry, Walt Disney Productions. Hiroshi brokered a licensing agreement that allowed Nintendo to print images of Mickey Mouse and other Disney characters on the back of their playing cards, wanting them to have a broader appeal. The strategy was massively successful. That year, Nintendo broke records and sold a whopping 600,000 packs of playing cards. It was no surprise that Nintendo went on to utterly dominate the Japanese playing card market. Despite the massive success of the playing card business, Hiroshi would soon come to the conclusion that card manufacturing was a limited venture with a narrow market. Soon, Hiroshi once again changed the name of the company to Nintendo Company Limited, and the company set its sights on different markets and broader products. And for a long time, this would not go well. At first, Nintendo branched out to making instant rice as an answer to the explosive popularity of instant noodles, and it was an instant failure. The Nintendo brand instant rice was said to not taste very good, plus Nintendo had to compete with other companies that already had experience making food, whereas Nintendo itself did not. Ultimately, the project made no profit and was cancelled. In 1960, Nintendo then created a taxi service company called Daiya Taxi, and during the first month, naturally made a profit. Daiya Taxi had a respectable fleet of 40 cars and was off to a good start. However, it soon came into problems with the taxi drivers union in Japan when their drivers demanded raises. Perhaps the most bizarre in retrospect was the Love Hotel enterprise. Love hotels are small hotels that charge hourly rates with as much discretion as possible, and have historically been quite popular in Japan as a place for couples and sex workers to have some private time. Although it seems outlandish, love hotels are well accepted in Japan and bring about a considerable amount of profit, which would have made them ideal for a business venture. It's even said that Hiroshi Yamauchi was his own best customer. However, that too was a failure, and little to no trace remains of Nintendo's brief fling with the business. The multiple failures in so many different business ventures didn't pass by Hiroshi without leaving a mark, and the ambitious man reconsidered his approach as the company's profit margin was quickly plummeting. Soon Hiroshi concluded that rather than trying something entirely new from scratch, the best direction forward was to rely on the distribution resources that Nintendo had already built over the decades it was successful. Nintendo would try something familiar, yet new, and it would be the true turning point for that era of the company. It was time to return to basics. Nintendo's next venture would be toys. After many years of unsuccessful ventures and multiple failures, focusing on toys would be the beginning of a turnaround for Nintendo. This is where most of the well-known early history of Nintendo began, and some of the toys the company would manufacture would become truly iconic and celebrated parts of the company. Gems such as Nintendo's Rabbit Coaster and the Nintendo Baseball Board were created during this era. But the real big home run of this Nintendo era would come when a young technician working on the Hanafuda assembly machines called Hiroshi Zai. The young man was amusing himself with a handmade toy he had created himself, and Hiroshi went on to task him with making it into something Nintendo could sell by Christmas time. That young man was Gunpei Yokoi, and he would go on to create some of Nintendo's greatest hits in the years to come. But at the time he was approached by Hiroshi, however, Yokoi would be first responsible for the creation of some vintage classics, the Nintendo Ultra Hand and the Nintendo Love Tester. The Love Tester was exactly what the name implied, a little device that would read heart rates of two players and determine their mutual passion. Meanwhile, the Nintendo Ultra Hand was essentially just an extendable arm, but it was wildly successful to the point where it was Nintendo's first toy to sell 1 million units and become the #1 toy in Japan from 1966 to 1970. And Nintendo still references their first massive toy success to this day in many of their products. It was a true revolution. After many years of failed businesses and ideas, the toy market brought Nintendo into a prosperous era, the likes of which it hadn't seen in almost 15 years. Nintendo broke into the 1970s as a popular, profitable company that enjoyed its status for all that it was worth, paving it to be an excellent decade for the company. But Hiroshi Yamauchi couldn't have predicted all that it would bring. After all, it was during the 70s that a new form of toy would make its appearance. All over the world, the first whispers of electronic games were making ripples in the market, and Nintendo would not miss out on the opportunity. But it would not be as straight a road as you might think. But that is a story for another day. And a big thank you to BeforeMario.com for many photos used in this video. If you'd like to learn more about Nintendo's history, be sure to head to their website. This was our telling of the tumultuous origins of Nintendo, but that is far from everything. Switchaboo will cover much more of Nintendo's history, and we hope you'll be back to listen again. Above everything else, thank you so much for watching.